Alright, this is going to be a weird video. Today we're going to be talking about fact checkers. Well, not just fact checkers in general, but a few years ago we saw a certain group of people get really angry at Facebook fact checkers. Now this would seem like a stupid thing to discuss. It would be, but these certain groups of people got so mad at Facebook fact checkers that they sued them. And for some reason this happened on two different occasions, roughly during the same period of time. Still, why talk about this? Lawsuits aren't always the most interesting thing, especially a lawsuit against fact checkers. You can imagine it's only going to be about facts. Well, it's because these cases are dumpster fires, in the enjoyable way. One of the plaintiffs is a libertarian known as John Stossel, who is suing Facebook and Science Feedback over the issue of calling one of his vids partly false and over attributing a quote to him. The other case is from Candace Owens, who is suing US Today and Lead Stories for saying that she was wrong, and linking their article. So before we start discussing the cases, we should discuss a little bit about defamation. Now, while these cases do bring up the malice standard, we don't have to talk about that, as it never really gets that far. We can focus on the general simple premise of defamation. That one person communicated to another person and made a false and harmful statement about that person. It may seem simple, but there are some difficulties, as there are exceptions and flexibilities to the rule itself. One of those more difficult things is the idea versus what is a fact versus what is an opinion. I've seen a lot of people make out the malice standard as the ultimate hurdle for defamation. It's really not. This is not to say that the fact versus opinion thing is that hurdle, but that distinction is way more complex than people give it credit for. This is not a simple one or the other, black and white, as a statement of opinion can carry either facts or the implication of a fact. Then there are statements based on disclosed versus undisclosed facts. These two things can change whether a statement is an opinion or not, as a statement made on the basis of other facts is likely not to be a statement of fact itself, but a viewpoint. All of this would be to say that context is something very important to defamation. Take, for example, if I say, in my opinion, Jones is a liar, believe it or not, just because I included the words in my opinion, that doesn't translate this statement itself into an opinion, and could be considered defamatory, as there is an implication of a set of undisclosed facts that would support my own statement. If, however, a person lays out the reasons for why Jones is a liar, it would more than likely make the statement to be that of an opinion. So context, or the lack thereof context, can change what a statement is. Then there's truth versus false. Truth is always an acceptable defense for defamation, but truth doesn't need to be 100% true. A statement can have minor inaccuracies in it, but as long as the gist or the sting of the statement is true, then it can be also considered an acceptable defense. For example, we could say that, let's say the statement, Jones killed a man with a Glock, but the actual reality was that Jones killed a man with like a shotgun. It's unlikely that this would be considered defamatory, as there is really no difference in the sting of these statements. There's a lot more complexities when it comes to defamation that I'm not going to fully touch on, like reporting privileges, republication, fair comment. But we don't need to cover all of those here, because they're not going to be really important to this case. And there are, of course, other factors to cover. I've said this before in a prior video, and I'm going to keep saying this. Context is super important. And that's especially so for a lawsuit. Seems simple, but is, of course, critically important. This vid will be mainly covering just the cases of Candace Owens and John Stossel. The main focus should be information that is important to figuring out what happened here. Take, for example, the 4 W's. What was in a statement? When was the statement made? Where was the statement made? And sometimes, why was the statement made? Why is usually important for malice purposes, but we don't really need to go over that much of why. The first 3 W's are basic, but also important. It would be crazy if you could not point out where a supposed statement of defamation was, or what was in the statement, or for whatever reason, when the statement was made. It shouldn't have that much impact, but it would seem weird if it was never mentioned. These W's are the most basic parts, and if you don't see them, that's a red flag. Now, I'm only using this into the reference to the possible defamatory statement itself, but this could be used to any part of a lawsuit as they're usually hyper-detailed. So whenever you see a missing detail, that's a red flag. Other important things that we should probably discuss is things like external representation versus internal representation. The idea here is talking a big game, but that doesn't actually usually translate to a real claim. I only say this because often at times we do see a split to how someone presents their claim or their case versus how they represent this case to a judge. One of those reasons is that you have to make an appealing argument to the judge, and an appealing argument to an audience is going to be a little bit different for an appealing argument to a judge. And if you start doing Weasley stuff, the judge will notice, and that can get you into trouble, and you might be disbarred. So you gotta be careful with that. So let's actually get into the meat and bones of this. Let's discuss Owen's lawsuit. Now, as I've said before, there's usually a difference between what someone claims they take issue with versus what they actually sue for. So how does Owens present her case?
My account, what I said was not false. And he basically wrote an article declaring it was false because he had found another doctor that disagreed. So basically, this was a game of my doctor is better than your doctor, but I'm lead stories and I work for Facebook, so I'm going to be able to censor you. And that's pointedly ridiculous. Wasn't happy with that. So I decided, you know what, let's put these guys through discovery. Said to my husband, I want to go after them. I want to sue them, and I want to expose who exactly these fact checkers are.
So how does her representation of her case look? Well, it's really bad, like really bad. The obvious problem here is that you have to show what the fact checker said was false. The problem in this case is that Owen seems to admit that everything she said was an opinion, or the fact checker statements themselves were also an opinion. And then she goes on to say that one of her statements that your doctor said something different than my doctor, and that makes it seem like an opinion.
And Facebook not only censored my page and removed the post, they wrote an article and they decided that it was not true because they had found another doctor who disagreed. So basically, Facebook censored me because their doctor was better than mine.
This again would likely fall under the idea of disclosed facts. The fact checkers are basing their statements on a doctor's statements. Remember, she has to consider the context of the statement and then still show it's false. But here in her own representation of her case, it seems like she's doing everything in her power to hurt her own claim. Even then, she doesn't attempt to use language to pretend her doctor's statements were not of that of an opinion, because early in the video, she also claims that they were also opinions.
Was that during COVID-19, I shared the opinion of an actual doctor who wrote an article talking about the harms of lockdown and talking about how the death counts weren't making sense. This was an actual doctor, okay?
I want to highlight one thing in all of her videos where she does discuss her case. She doesn't actually mention the claim of issue, which you would assume to be either defamation or slander, or to explicitly point out where they lied about her. She doesn't really do that. But you do hear the word opinion thrown around a lot in any of those videos.
Tweet, what we can put on Facebook, what opinions we're allowed to share, removing the opinions of doctors who are your opinion and you're censored.
Write his opinion check.
Horrible, corrupt, racist country. I don't want that fact checked and removed. I want to prove her wrong with my free speech. That is what this country was built on, free speech. Your free speech may be your opinion may be wrong, but I want to protect your wrong opinion, right, with my right opinion.
So from the very outset, it seems like the issue here is that she has a problem with fact checkers because they said her opinion was wrong. Now, there's a problem with this line of thinking. Take, for example, let's say Joe Schmo says that this insert diner is the best diner ever. And then I say, and I go up to him and I say, false. This is not the best diner ever. I say Moonlight All Night Diner is the best diner ever. Unfortunately, what I said was a statement of opinion, and likewise, the other person's statement was also that of opinion. See the line of issue here? You have to prove a defamation. The other person is saying a statement of false fact. So now we're in the situation where you have to hope that the lawsuit is radically different from how she represents it. And it is, a little bit. We have more substance. We have her post. We have the lead stories article. For some reason, we have US Today in the complaint. So let's dig into that. Owens' first post makes the claim that people who die and are asymptomatic of COVID are being listed as COVID deaths. She then links an article which she argues is proof that they're manipulating the numbers. She also claims that obesity is America's #1 killer, with a tweet that says something similar, like heart disease is America's #1 problem. That doesn't seem like an issue, but it'll come up. The lead stories article basically just lists out several inaccuracies with Owens' post, pointing out her lack of knowledge when it comes to cause of death, contribution, and how it works. Now this seems like very surface level information, but I'm doing that with a purpose. I want to keep it brief, because it should only become important and specific when it comes to the discussions of the defamatory part. So what are the defamatory issues? Well, we have 3 statements which she claims are defamatory, that are from the article, and we also find out that she takes issue with the label hoax and the label false, which come from a thumbnail. Now, I will be returning to these claims, but I want to cover one more issue first. As I've said before, USA Today is also in this lawsuit, and I don't really understand why, based on the complaint's reasoning. As like before, we do get more substance. We do get the reference to her second Facebook post and the USA Today article. In the post, she lists 2020 as having the lowest flu death season of the decade. Only 20,000 deaths took place before COVID in January, and then only 4,000 right after. Then she makes the claim that only 80,000 people died of the flu in 2019. Below it, she has a tweet saying that no one died from the flu and the CDC has stopped calculating flu deaths. So what's the defamatory statement that Owens claims? Well, there really isn't any specific statement. They just claimed that the USA Today article said they were false, and that's what they take issue with. Not any specific statement. That is a red flag. Owens' team would further go on to prove that the article was false by making the statement that her second Facebook post isn't capable of being fact-checked because the post was merely being sarcastic about the differences between flu deaths and COVID-19 deaths. This is all bullshit. To be clear, I was mystified that USA Today was in the lawsuit because Owens' team doesn't have a claim against them for defamation. This statement is pointless because Owens' team themselves know they can't prove anything that USA Today said was false. The tweet itself was sarcastic, sure, but the article also realizes that. The Facebook post had data, it had numbers, it wasn't being sarcastic, and guess what? The article did show that they were wrong. The lawsuit doesn't mention that though. And again, they want to sue for defamation, but they themselves realize they don't have a claim. They can't show anything in the article was false. They just allude to taking issue with being called wrong. So what now? Why are they here? Well, here's the trick. Owens' team has additional claims against them. These claims are unfair competition and tortious interference. This is an attempt to argue around the First Amendment, because if they found anything false in the article, they would have mentioned it. Does this line of thinking or argument work? No. There are a few exceptions to the First Amendment, but not this one. As we continue on, we see further and further more bad arguments pop up. Take it for example this statement here. Owens' post could not be false because it in part illustrated a mere disagreement among experts. I know this should be obvious, but the word disagreement inherently has the implication that one party is wrong, or better yet, let's use the word false. Would it have been better if instead lead stories had said that reality has a disagreement with you? Would that have been better? This also just hurts your own position because you don't want to make it into a disagreement. You want to make it into defamation. And a disagreement doesn't sound like defamation. Let's get back to the lead stories thing. Let's go look at those 3 claims and those 2 labels. Now, I showed them on screen for a few seconds, probably not enough time for you to look at them, so let's show them again. First of all, I want to tell you, these statements don't matter. They're nothing. Well, they don't matter to Owens' own team. If they did, they would cover them in more depth, but they never do. To me, it's more so an attempt to bulk up a lackluster defamation case. Take, for example, statement 1. Notice those brackets? Those brackets are added by Owens' team. So the false or about COVID-19 deaths, those were added by Owens' team. So the original claim is, here is where it was published, here is when it was published, and that's it. So statement 1, for all intents and purposes, is practically made up by Owens' own team. The only notion of something that could be defamation would be the false claim, but that was added by your own team. For the second statement, it has the same feeling as the first. It's just tacked on to make the case feel bigger. But they don't really explain what part of this is false, as one could easily see the statement as being based on Owens' prior quote. The only acceptable possible issue, then, is statement 3. There are several inaccuracies. However, the issue with this is that it's surface level. Take note the lack of specificity. In an article where it points out what she doesn't understand or that there is a contradiction here, she has issue with the surface level statement that there are inaccuracies with her post. She doesn't take issue with where they concisely say what she got wrong. No, she takes issue with that flat statement that there are inaccuracies. That, again, is another red flag. The label false is similar to this, staying vague and avoiding details. How about the label hoax? Well, surprisingly, in the complaint, it's a minor thing, but as the case would go on and the other arguments would fail, the label hoax would take the main stage. Their argument being is that by using the word hoax and hoax alone, they have effectively argued that Candace Owen was intentionally lying. The problem with this argument is that nowhere in the article does it mention the statement hoax or the argument that Candace Owen had been intentionally lying. Only in the thumbnail itself do we see the label hoax. Again, we have that classic removal of any context. The best and obvious defense for lead stories was that this language was obviously being hyperbolic. Nowhere do we see it actually mentioned in the article itself, and it was only being used as a thumbnail. And who hasn't seen a hyperbolic thumbnail? I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that this case kept going, and it kept going. So it was in originally local state court, and then it goes to Delaware Supreme Court, and then it goes to the actual Supreme Court. So Candace Owens was in this case for the long haul. Facts. For a case fighting against fact checkers, you would hope that they would make sure that their own facts are solid, or at least show how the fact checkers got it wrong. But we don't see that. Even in one of their videos where they again announce that they're suing fact checkers, it's well produced. But again, there's no actual facts in it. There's no substance. There's no evidence. It's just platitudes and virtue signaling.
Facebook gives them the ability to destroy the reach of our content, so we cannot communicate with you. They demonetize our pages so we can't make a living producing content for our audiences. And here is the breathtaking part. Most of these fact checks are pure partisan bile. They are false, fake, untrue. But there is no recourse for your favorite conservative creators. This is why I am suing the Facebook fact checkers. I'm suing them on behalf of you, your favorite creators and news sites, on behalf of our freedom of speech and thought.
So the next idea is about principle. She is fighting against fact checkers. She's fighting against big tech. And of course, she is fighting for freedom of speech. Let's not think about that too hard right now, about especially how that would work against a defamation case, because the defamation cases are inherently about punishing another person's speech. Don't think about that one, all right? First of all, while she has advertised that she's fighting against Zuckerberg and big tech, even including a donate to my lawsuit website showing as such, that is a lie. She has in fact never sued him. And as I've said, this case kept going, and we got to see an oral argument from both sides, with Owens' lawyer opening and making a statement about what this case is really about.
I'd like to start by emphasizing that this case is not about the First Amendment. It's not a free speech case. It's a case that's about tortious interference with contract. And the contract that was tortiously interfered with was between Candace Owens and Facebook, and it was done so by market competitors.
This is Owens' lawyer. Now, he can say that this isn't about the First Amendment, but anytime a question of acceptable speech comes up, that is always the question of the First Amendment. Now, of course, one might say that defamation is an exception. It's not a form of protected speech. But notice his language. He's not running with that idea. He's attempting to create a new exception to the First Amendment, an exception that doesn't exist. Tortious interference, market competition, those are not hallmarks of a defamation claim. Remember, USA Today, believe it or not, is still here and is not being sued for defamation. Owens' lawyer has to create a fictitious exception to the First Amendment. Owens' team failed to show that they were ever defamed in the lower court. So what's their next argument? Well, they don't need to show anything false here. They just hurt my business because they said mean things about it.
Not contend that the statements in the fact check articles have to be false for them to be actionable. We believe that the fact of saying false or putting a false label over an article itself is an instrumentality of a tort, and that it triggers and sends a message to Facebook that it should immediately, or that it puts a blanket over the message on Facebook that was put forward by Ms. Owens, and it makes it hard to read, it makes it hard to share, and over time, those so-called strikes add up to a circumstance where Facebook terminated its contract with Ms. Owens. So
this is a bad idea. You said something bad about me, I get to sue you. Doesn't matter whether it's false or not, as long as I get to show that it hurt my business. That's antithetical to the First Amendment. Fact checker corrects you, you can't prove them wrong, Facebook sees the fact checker's speech and decides to penalize you for spreading misinformation. You can't sue them for being wrong and harming you, so just drop your belief in free speech. Or rather, you never really had it to begin with. There's always a question of what is free speech, but I'm pretty sure this would violate anyone's belief system. So what the lawyer is trying to do right now is a very classic anti-free speech or First Amendment idea. It's used a lot. It's the idea of conduct versus speech. This is an attempt to get around the First Amendment in a way, as the First Amendment only protects speech. The problem with this line of thinking is that conduct and speech are often intertwined with each other. One of the main problems with this line of thinking is that it really isn't a black and white idea. A lot of conduct can be considered speech, and basically all speech is effectively conduct. The main problem I really have with her case is that the way that she presents herself. She presents herself as fighting against censorship and for free speech. Suing someone for defamation will require limiting another person's speech. I'd say that most of us can find it to be some level of acceptable, because the speech is harmful and false about another person. But for here, USA Today wasn't ever sued for that. Owens' claim was that, well, it doesn't matter whether it's false or not. It's that it was unfair to me. It hurt my business. That doesn't sound like an anti-censorship argument. It certainly doesn't sound like a First Amendment argument. As long as it benefits her, yeah, she'll be fine with censorship. I want to put one thing in your mind. According to Owens, in her own complaint, she was making about $1 million each month from Facebook. That's insane. I don't even know you could make that much from Facebook. And I think with the other facts, it's clear that this case wasn't about free speech? No, of course not. $1 million from Facebook every month? This case is about the money. We don't need to keep discussing this. We don't need to look at the next arguments. The game has been given away. State court, she lost that one. Delaware Supreme Court, she also lost that one. America Supreme Court, yeah, no, they didn't take her case seriously. So how about the other case? The case from John Stossel? Well, in some ways, it's a lot better. In other ways, it's incredibly bad. It's way worse.
But it does not have the right to just lie about me. The lie starts with Facebook's so-called fact checker, a group called Climate Feedback, run by this man. It posted this statement in quotes as if it were something I said. But I never said that. In my video arguing that government mismanagement fueled California's wildfires, I acknowledged that climate change plays a role. Climate change has made things worse. California's warmed 3 degrees over 50 years. So Climate Feedback uses a quote I never said, and based on that, Facebook restricts my view. Again, Climate Feedback got Facebook to label that video partly false. But what was false? My video said climate change is real. The alarmists have evidence that supports their fears. Temperature is rising.
The first claim looks fine from the outset. We have a mention of what, when, and where Stossel's video is located, and what and where the issue of the falsely attributed quote is located. The partly false claim is similar. We have the 3 W's for the video and the 3 W's for the partly false label. So what went wrong? Honestly, the case does look normal and acceptable from the outside. It's hardly too peculiar. Of course, though, you don't see too many defamation cases against a fact-checking website, so it's hard to say what any of that means. But lawsuits cost a lot of money. Like, why would you throw money at a bad claim? You're not just wasting money. You're wasting a lot of money. And of course, they last forever, which equals, of course, more money. Then again, though, if winning isn't on the table, there are still ways to win a case without technically winning a case. So, then again, what went wrong? When we start to actually get inside, things look normal. Small things are off, but generally still nothing too strange or objectionable. As said before, the case itself seems normal. The claims are represented just as they discuss them through their vids. This starts to change, though, as the case progresses, as people start to look critically at the details. And what seems to be straightforward starts to become twisted. Let's take, for example, that partly false claim. I want to be clear here and cover the context. Stossel makes and releases a video on Facebook that basically downplays climate change. Later, it would be fact-checked, of course, on Facebook. This is basically a label and a link to an article. The label, of course, said, just partly false. The article, which is titled Video Promoted by John Stossel for Earth Day, relies on incorrect and misleading claims about climate change, and of course points out multiple places where Stossel's video got something wrong. Here's the weird thing about this. He's not suing for anything in the article. He's not suing for the title. He doesn't claim anything in the article is false or defamatory. No, he is only suing for the single label on Facebook, where it said his video was partly false. This is a red flag. I say that because it's a bit weird where an article states multiple times where you're wrong, and you don't take issue with that. I want to be clear, he's only suing for the label, nothing in the article itself, which mentions, again, where he got multiple things wrong. The label itself is like the most milquetoast thing to be offended by. The label is partly false. It's like saying that someone's partly wrong. And the stated definition and reason is, fact checkers say that this information has some factual inaccuracies. If you think about it, you realize he's suing a fact checker for saying he wasn't 100% accurate with his video. It's nothing. This is dumb. In a way, this part of the lawsuit is reminiscent of Owens. He's removing the reason why his vid was called partly false. He's removing the article. He doesn't claim anything in the article is false or defamatory, but the article is the basis for why his vid was called false, or partly false, I guess. He's trying to remove the facts. The question then remains, why not sue for anything in the article? Why remove all of these facts? The obvious reason is that the partly false statement is an opinion based on disclosed facts, and Stossel's team has to remove the disclosed part, i.e. the evidence. There are other similarities to Owens' case, like making the mistake that they fact-checked your opinion and making it seem more akin to a disagreement. So Stossel isn't attempting to call his own statement a fact, but again a scientific opinion, which would be feedback's own defense. And of course, disagreeing with another person has that implication. Stossel's team effectively admits as such in their case. They are suing over opinion, but they wouldn't have filed or sued the fact-checkers if the fact-checkers just said that this whole thing was a disagreement. Again, would it have been better if the fact-checkers just said, reality has a disagreement with you? Disagreement has that implication. Again, we can apply the test. There's a person that says X is the best diner ever. And if I say fact check false, X isn't the best diner ever, it's instead all night midnight diner is the best diner ever, this is still a statement of subjective opinion. Unfortunately, it's an opinion nonetheless. These types of arguments hurt you in the long run. Then there's the issue with Stossel and his team playing loose with the facts themselves, making the claim that his video has no false facts, and climate feedback never pointed to a single false fact. Therefore, they've been defamed. Take, for example,
My video also questioned the claim that hurricanes are
getting stronger and stronger. The winds are getting harder and harder.
No, they aren't. You can take a look at all the hurricanes around the planet. We can see them since 1970 because we got global satellite coverage.
Right.
And we can measure their power. And there is no significant increase whatsoever.
misleads viewers, said Vincent. But his own reviewer told me
And that's true. We don't see a change in hurricane frequency.
that's consensus opinion. Yet Vincent still censors me for reporting it.
I think that's wrong that you were criticized for saying that. The IPCC, they don't claim that they're increasing.
Later, Brown emailed us saying the problem is omission of contextual information rather than facts being wrong.
this framing is dishonest and with what seems to be bad faith edits. Take, for example, what is being discussed is storms getting worse, to then Patrick Brown agreeing with Stossel that frequency of the storms aren't increasing. These are two different ideas. Storm intensity, i.e. storms getting worse, and then storm frequency are two different things. It's weird that we only see Patrick Brown, only a small clip of him commenting on, storm frequency, which he agrees with. But we never see the storm intensity brought up. Does he agree with that idea? It's not mentioned. This is unusual because why does this discussion exist? Why is this being brought up? Because it doesn't ever reference the article. It doesn't bring up what the article took issue with. So why are we talking about this? Does it prove the fact checkers wrong? Why are we talking about storm frequency, storm intensity? Does the article itself ever bring up these topics? That's the important question here. I say that because the article itself also agrees that frequency isn't being affected. Why didn't Stossel mention that? Makes it seem like you're attempting to do a gotcha that doesn't really exist. You don't need Patrick here. The article already states, it already agrees with you. But then again, it does point out numerous things that you get wrong. It brings up storm intensity, which it argues is getting worse, but you never correct them on that. You correct them on storm frequency, which they already agree with you. That seems like a red flag. So what's the point in including this bit? It feels like a fake gotcha for your audience, to pretend that fact checkers are dumb and you're some intellectual heavyweight. That's what this feels like. Then, of course, there are multiple other things that, climate/science feedback point out that Stossel got wrong. None of those are really ever brought up, though. In fact, strangely enough, I don't think Stossel in his video points to a single thing that science feedback got wrong. The big issue is the label, nothing else. Just the label, all right? You can't say that I'm partly false, but I mean, sure, you can say I got all these things wrong in the article itself, but wow, the partly false label, that is a step too far. His team, Stossel's team, has to ignore these problems, a thing which the fact checkers quickly realize and call out, making the statement that, once again, plaintiffs simply ignore facts that are inconvenient to his arguments. The language we see early on in the paragraph that plaintiff also asserts that science feedback did not identify a single misstatement of fact is a legal/language trick that they're trying to do. Again, this is wrong. They point out multiple times in the article where the plaintiff is wrong. When I say this is a trick, this is likely done in the purpose of shifting responsibility, as an attempt to moving away from having to prove that anything climate feedback had said was false. We see this argument fully fleshed out by, instead of, again, pointing to a single false fact, is instead making the argument that, well, my video contained no false facts. They're trying to shift away the duty to prove falsity. That's a defamation thing. You have the duty to prove that the defendant lied or their statements were false. However, this argument is garbage, as feedback could make the same, argument. They could say that their article or label contained no false facts, and Stossel himself identified none. Well, except that's probably an acceptable, defense for them. Because if you're suing someone for defamation, it's on you to show where they were false or lied. Now, of course, the judge recognized what Stossel's team was trying to do and didn't go with it. The obvious reason is that because Stossel doesn't point to a single thing that feedback got wrong, only arguing that their vid had no false facts. Again, this is an argument and is feedback's own defense. Stossel's team doesn't do the bare minimum of pointing out a single false thing from feedback. So what about the false attribution claim? Well, it looks good. It looks like a good claim. We have an actual statement of what was published and where it was published. And I think that most people's opinions during this time were that this was a really good part of the complaint. So what were the issues? We have the claim that the reviewers for the article didn't actually watch his video, yet the article itself falsely attributes a quote to Stossel.
2 of the 3 scientists listed as their reviewers did agree to interviews.
You're smearing me based on something I didn't say.
Yeah, I mean, I've never commented on your article.
That was a shock. He hadn't even seen my video.
If this is implying that we have reviewed the video, then this is clearly wrong. There's something wrong with the system.
This issue has become very political, which is unfortunate.
Zeke Housefather's another climate feedback reviewer. He hadn't seen the video either.
I certainly did not write a climate feedback piece reviewing your segment.
Well, there were a few issues, a few big problems. Stossel makes the claim in his video that not only did he not make this claim, but in his own video he has a claim that would be counter to it.
It posted this statement in quotes as if it were something I said. But I never said that. In my video arguing that government mismanagement fueled California's wildfires, I acknowledged that climate change plays a role. Climate change has made things worse. California's warmed 3 degrees over 50 years. So climate feedback uses a quote I never said, and based on that, Facebook restricts my views.
However, the usage of this statement is dishonest. As I've shown before, Stossel plays fast and loose with the context of other people's statements. Of course, he's going to play fast with his own statements. This is a 6-second clip from a video called Government Fueled Fires. Do you really think he's going to acknowledge climate change and its effects? Or is he just going to blame, I don't know, the government? Let's just play the clip a little bit longer to see if there's anything else to it.
Climate change has made things worse. California's warmed 3 degrees over 50 years. But
you could have had this amount of warming and not had these fires. And the reason we know that is because the forests that were well managed have survived the megafires.
It's weird you left out that last bit, because if you included the full sentence, it would create a statement of opposite meaning. Look back at that supposed attribution. It's the same gist, it's the same sting. You, in your own video, are making that claim. It may not be the same words, but it's the same idea. The first problem here is that Stossel's own claim matches the claim of the article. We even see early on in his own video, he repeats that idea, that forest fires' main cause is poor management, not climate change.
Climate change is real. It's not the end of the world. It's not our most serious environmental problem.
And it's not the main cause of the California fire. If not climate change, what is to blame?
Only you can prevent forest fires.
Foolish policies.
Remember, it doesn't have to be 100% true, just substantially enough. So if he's basically making the claim in his own video, right, it's basically what the whole video is about, it can't really be defamatory at that point. But also, let's be real, he's practically just lying right now to his audience. And of course being a snake in the judicial system. I consider one of these to be an actual big problem, like in real life, because one of them is a huge waste of money and time for everybody. While this already shows the whole false attribution claim to be done in fairly bad faith, what I've only shown you so far is only one problem. There are a few other issues with this whole thing. Remember when Stossel made that claim that the reviewers didn't actually watch or review his video before writing the article? Well, let's review that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never commented on your article.
That was a shock. He hadn't even seen my video.
If this is implying that we have reviewed the video, then this is clearly wrong. There's something wrong with the system.
This issue has become very political, which is unfortunate.
Zeke Housefather's another climate feedback reviewer. He hadn't seen the video either.
I certainly did not write a climate feedback piece reviewing your segment.
One of the interesting facets of this lawsuit is that this video was labeled missing context on Facebook. Now, to be clear, he isn't suing for that. He's only suing for some reason just a single quote on the article that was linked to this Facebook post. Why bring this up? Well, what the reviewer said was true, but Stossel is leaving out important context for why or how that's possible. Remember early on in the video, I mentioned the importance of what, when, and where. Let's take all of that into consideration and refer to the initial complaint, the thing that started all of this. Stossel's team gives us the what, his fire video, and Climate Feedback's article with the quote in it. He gives us the location of both, which is great. They give us the date of when his fire video was released, but not the article. For some reason, throughout all of his motions, they leave out when that article was published. Of course, one could be saying that I'm nitpicking right now. It's a weird thing, a small nitpick, an issue we can resolve right now. Stossel's fire video was published September 22nd, 2020. Climate Feedback's article was published on September 16th, 2020. If the article is reviewing and, according to Stossel, falsely attributing a statement to the fire video, wouldn't it require said article to be published after the video? The only way this makes sense is that Climate Feedback has invented time travel, or according to Climate Feedback, they'd have to be clairvoyants. How does this work? Well, the reviewers themselves said they didn't review his video. And that's true. Nowhere in the article does it mention him or his video. That's because the article isn't about him. It's about some random Facebook user. One question pops into my mind. Was this lawsuit done in good faith? Was the video done in good faith? No. This was definitely all done in bad faith. Like, let's assume that this is a mistake. We have to assume they didn't check the date of when the article was published. They didn't click on the source, which is located front and center on the article itself. They didn't think it was unusual that the article never mentioned him. They might as well have never actually read the article, but for some reason, the quote somehow... Hold on. The date of the claim is also published, like right next to the source. It's September 9th. They didn't think it's strange that the dates of the claims didn't match? All of these are red flags. So here we are at the end. What's there to conclude? Well, I don't think any of this was about the facts. It certainly wasn't about censorship, nor do I think it was about either COVID or climate change. So why sue? They never really sued a fact checker before. Well, it feels like Facebook, to them, was a good place to make a lot of money. And losing a platform's revenue, to them, was losing a good chunk of change. But since this is a defamation case, it ultimately aims at censoring another person. And, as you've seen so far, they certainly don't have facts on their side. So they decided to say the opposite, that they're pro-free speech, that they're anti-censorship, that they're pro-truth. But again, as you've seen before, their lawsuits don't say that. There are two courts. The courts of public opinion, and the actual court system. For these cases, sure, there was some appeals in the beginning to the public about their cases. But, and I find this telling, near the end of their cases, it's dead silence. There's no updates. There's no call-outs against the judges or the other lawyers. Because if they did, there's a chance that someone would actually read what the judges had to say and see that this all of this is nonsense. So, I think it's time to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching, peeps.
Hey everyone. I want to talk about something important today, because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today.
So it looks like that Facebook fact-checkers have been nuked. This is because there were claims over them being biased. There's a great video by Upper Echelon that talks about all of this. And when I say great, I mean a garbage video. Ironically enough, it shows how bias can be really harmful to content creation.
I'll start with this. Facebook uses a well-documented approach to fact-checking, which relies on an organization called IFCN, which is the International Fact-Checking Network. That system, however, was only implemented in 2020. Prior to that, Facebook used more direct partners, such as Snopes.com, for a multi-year period, ending in 2019. Interestingly, Snopes.com is actually one of the signatories for the IFCN, which means that Facebook is actually still working with them to a degree. It's just not a direct link between the two companies. Considering its direct partnership from 2016 to 2019 and its current approved status with the International Fact-Checking Network, Snopes is the example I chose to focus on for today while discussing the concept of fact-checking.
This is a small thing. Being a signatory is a certification. Facebook just requires you to be certified by the IFCN to join their program. The signatory system is open to the public, meaning anybody could apply to it. I could apply to it. Echelon could apply to it. And Echelon is making it look like it's some kind of interconnected fact-checker business group. It's not. Again, this is a small thing, but it's the premise of his video, because he thinks that Facebook is somehow indirectly partnered with Snopes, but they're really not. Like, what does the indirect partnership actually mean? How does Snopes benefit from this? It's not really explained. That's weird. This video, though, like I said before, is just gripes. Like, it's just discussing all the bad things that Snopes or its founder has ever done.
Deciding to go down the rabbit hole, because why not go down the rabbit hole, I went and looked at the staff page, where way down at the bottom, there's a note that says, quote, members of our editorial staff are precluded from donating to or participating in political campaigns, political party activities, or political advocacy organizations, end quote. That sounds fine, right? But something told me to start checking, so I picked a name and I checked. I picked Jordan Lyles, who is a senior reporter, obviously part of the editorial staff, working at Snopes for the past 8 years in various different positions. And I looked up political campaign contributions, which turned up this right here, showing a bunch of donations by people named Jordan Lyles to various committees and politicians. That's no big deal, but small problem. 5 of those donations in 2018 come from someone named Jordan Lyles, who was employed at the time by a company called BarDav. And this is where I went way far down the rabbit hole, because BarDav was apparently a joint company created by Barbara and David Mickelson, founders of Snopes, where each of them owned a 50% share. It's the parent organization of Snopes.com. And connecting the dots now, Jordan Lyles, while working for Snopes at the level of video producer, was donating actively to ActBlue, which is a Democratic super PAC. And that was the first name I chose.
Here's the thing. This could be a mistake on Lyle's part. It could be that he wasn't part of the editorial staff back then. I mean, it said that he was part of the video producer, but I don't know if that was considered editorial staff back then. Then again, it was 2018, and the total amount, the total stunning amount, nefarious amount, was $35. That's the smoking gun. That's it. Isn't it possible that one could consider this to be good looking for Snopes? This is them enforcing their policy. The guy hasn't donated to like ActBlue or anything similar in about 7 years. That's like almost a decade. Doesn't that make them look good in a way for enforcing their policy? Echelon would go on further with other supposed problematic donations.
The chief revenue officer, Justin Wohl. One person shows up in the political donation archives who simultaneously gave money to ActBlue as well as the Biden campaign, but the employer of this person is Salon. I thought to myself, well, that can't be him. But that little voice came back in my head because this person working at Salon, was also a chief revenue officer. What are the chances of that happening? So I checked the LinkedIn page, and wait a second, Justin Wohl, according to his employment history on his own social media, simultaneously worked as the chief revenue officer at Snopes and Salon in 2020, which is when the donations were made. 2 for 2, and this time at least he chose a company other than BarDav to put on the public record for his political campaign contributions, which, I mean, that's a choice. You're employed by these 2 different companies, and you chose to put Salon.
One of the things that I worry about is that people don't pay attention to what I'm visually showing them. That's why I like to try to include little gags here and there. I bring this all up is that because if you actually pay attention to Echelon's video, you'd be able to easily see the mistake he just made. Firstly, the chief revenue officer isn't part of the editorial staff. That's an easy one, though. The other is that he wasn't working at Salon and Snopes at the same time. He only started Snopes in 2022, 2 years after he donated. Here's the thing. I don't know what he's doing with that tone of language near the end of his clip, because to me, it feels like he's implying that Wohl is doing something nefarious here and trying to be hush-hush with his donations by stating Salon instead of Snopes. But then again, Justin Wohl, again, wasn't working for Salon and Snopes at the same time. That is a mistake on your part. And so this assumption that you're trying to make is, again, borne out by a mistake on your part. Because you're not here looking for actual research, trying to understand what Snopes is. You're looking for gripes, first and foremost. Echelon would keep going on with this whole donations bit, but near the latter half starts to put caveats in his language.
This is Anna, who is a straight up reporter for Snopes, as in the people writing the fact checks. Well, Anna comes up with a lot of small donations to ActBlue in 2020 with an employer listed as annual reviews, which made 3 separate instances where Snopes employees, including those on the editorial team, were either actively donating to a Democratic super PAC during their employment or donated directly prior to their employment in that position. Remember, as per the IFCN criteria, Snopes was asked for evidence of their policy preventing direct involvement in political parties. It doesn't specify who or how or when, it just says involvement. And sure, you could technically make an argument that donations directly prior to your involvement at a fact-checking website for one political party don't compromise you, or
Anna donated in 2020. She started working there in 2024. So the big issue is that she donated 4 years ago. I feel like Echelon, as the video goes on, starts to realize that he doesn't really have anything to show for it in his vid. You know what? Hold on. I bet all of these people participated in some way to help a political group while they were working. I bet they voted. This whole thing is nothing. This is fake drama, right? Donations that happened years ago. It feels like fake drama. As I've said before, all Echelon is looking for is drama, for gripes. That's it. There's no real strong substance or interconnection between any of them. He's just looking for drama. In a section of the vid, he's just talking about all the bad things that Snopes' founder did,
which contained allegations by Barbara Mickelson that her husband, Snopes founder David Mickelson, had been embezzling money, defrauding the company, and spending the money on prostitutes. But wait, there's more, because not only did David Mickelson divorce her, he also married another Snopes employee, a staffer named Alyssa Young, who, according to a Daily Mail investigation, maintained a website advertising her services as an escort while she was working at Snopes. It comes out that David Mickelson, who still had his ownership stake in Snopes, served as an officer and apparently also worked for them in an editorial capacity, was suspended because he wrote dozens of plagiarized articles between 2015 and 2019 under an alias, and these are the people that are fact-checking you.
This coverage is aiming to make Snopes look like the bad guy. They did take action for the plagiarism. They removed those articles. They apologized. They suspended him. Those are all good things that they did. The allegations that he brings up, those are the best showings of Echelon's own bias. These allegations were from around 2017, so almost a decade ago. What happened to them? Were they dismissed? It's a weird thing to bring up allegations and then go nowhere with them. Did nothing happen during those years? Why are we talking about this? Echelon never digs into the case, probably because it doesn't matter. The case record wasn't difficult to find. I found it in less than an hour. It's linked down below if you want to look at it. I want to propose an interesting question for you. What does David, or the founder, what role does he take right now in Snopes? Like, what does he do right now? Echelon doesn't really say or talk about that, but that's because it's all about making Snopes and fact-checkers look bad. Why do I bring it up? Well, it's because he stepped down in 2022 and lost control over the company. So he hasn't worked there for 3 years. Why are we talking about him? I want to be clear about one thing. I don't want to imply that any of Upper Echelon's mistakes were lies, and that he himself is also a liar. No, I don't think that. I just think that he's an overrated idiot. There's no way he actually put any time into researching for this vid. Zuck's statement about the fact checkers came out on January 7th. Upper Echelon released his video on January 8th. Therefore, Upper Echelon has likely done less than 24 hours to work on this vid. No time to do real research. No time to think about what should be said. And hardly enough time to check for corrections. That's a dumb decision. One other important thing is that you don't have enough time to see other people's responses. What do other people think? What do fact checkers think about this? Take, for example, Snopes, which they repeat they haven't been part of the program since 2019 and view the future changes as a possible good thing. However, they view Zuck's statements as a cop-out and is attempting to make them, the fact-checkers, into scapegoats.
Mark Zuckerberg is saying, oh, well, the fact-checkers or biased fact-checkers are causing censorship. And we've already established that Facebook was one that determined when posts are taken down or not. But let's look at the most famous example of Facebook censoring content, and that was the Hunter Biden laptop story. And we say, well, it was fact-checkers, right, who told Zuckerberg to limit the reach of that? No, it was the government. So Facebook complied with the government, and then the fact-checkers get the blame. If Kamala Harris would have won, would he be taking any of these same actions now? No. He complied with what the government wanted then, and he's complying with what the new administration wants now.
So what's there to say here? Well, for Echelon, I just think he's an idiot and a little bit lazy. For the others, I don't think they're anti-facts or fact-checking. If fact-checkers fact-check something you don't like, you're probably going to be cool with it. But vice versa for the opposite. Yeah, I don't think Stossel or Owens are anti-fact-checking. No. I think that they're just pure grift. Being pro or anti-facts doesn't matter. We haven't seen them sue another person for fact-checking them before. Why sue a fact-checker now then? Well, it's because of Facebook. Why is Facebook important? Because Facebook is for some reason a place where they can make a lot of views and therefore a lot of money.